The moment you stop seeking approval, your life changes. Most people spend their entire lives chasing approval. Approval from friends, approval from family, approval from coworkers, approval from strangers who barely know them. It begins early. As children, we quickly learn something. When we behave the way others want, we are rewarded. When we disagree, resist, or act differently, we are corrected. Slowly, almost invisibly, a habit forms. We begin to monitor ourselves. We watch how people react to what we say. We watch their faces. We listen to their tone, and then we adjust. A little less honesty, a little more politeness, a little more agreement. Over time, something subtle happens. Your behavior stops being guided by your own thinking. It becomes guided by other people's reactions. This is the invisible prison of approval. Most people live inside it their entire lives. They don't notice it because everyone around them is doing the same thing. Watch what happens in a normal conversation. Someone says something controversial, the room goes quiet. People scan the reactions around them. Who is smiling? Who looks uncomfortable? Who disagrees? Then they carefully adjust what they say next, not based on what they believe, but based on what will be accepted. Approval becomes the compass. But the problem with using approval as a compass is simple. It never points north. It points toward comfort, toward agreement, toward safety, toward the path where no one feels challenged. And over time, a person slowly loses something important, their independence. Not in a dramatic way, not in an obvious way, but quietly, one small adjustment at a time. They stop saying what they really think. They stop taking risks that might upset people. They stop disagreeing when something feels wrong. They start choosing words carefully, too carefully. Soon, every decision begins passing through the same filter. Will people approve of this? Will this upset someone? Will this make me look bad? And the strange thing is that this behavior is usually praised. People call it being polite, being considerate, being agreeable. But there is a hidden cost. The person who constantly seeks approval becomes predictable, and predictability removes power. When people know you need approval, they begin to control your behavior without even trying. They don't have to demand anything. Your own mind does the work for them. You start adjusting before they even react. You explain yourself more. You soften your opinions. You avoid difficult truths. And slowly, you become easier to manage, easier to influence, easier to ignore. But something very interesting happens the moment you stop seeking approval. People notice. At first, they don't understand what changed. They simply feel it. Your responses become shorter. Your explanations become fewer. You say what you mean without dressing it up, and suddenly the familiar signals disappear. People can't predict how you'll react, and unpredictability creates a strange kind of respect. Because when someone no longer depends on approval, they become harder to manipulate. Imagine two people in a disagreement. The first person desperately wants the other to agree with them. They explain their point repeatedly. They justify every decision. They try to smooth things over. The second person calmly states their position once. They don't argue endlessly. They don't beg to be understood. They simply say what they think and remain calm. Which one appears stronger? Most people assume strength comes from speaking more, from explaining more clearly, from defending your position in detail, but in reality, strength often appears in the opposite direction, in restraint, in calm certainty, in the ability to let disagreement exist without trying to eliminate it. When someone no longer needs approval, they stop trying to control how others perceive them, and that changes everything. Their energy shifts, their posture changes. Their words become simpler, because they are no longer negotiating for acceptance. This doesn't mean they become rude. It doesn't mean they stop listening. It simply means their self-worth no longer depends on external validation. And this creates a powerful psychological effect. People begin adjusting to them, not because they demand it, but because they no longer bend themselves to fit every expectation. Consider how rare this is. Most conversations today are filled with subtle signals of approval seeking. People laugh when they are unsure if something was funny. They apologize for opinions that might cause discomfort. They soften statements with phrases like, "Maybe I'm wrong," or "This might sound stupid." These small habits reveal something important, a fear of rejection. And when fear is visible, influence becomes easy. But when someone speaks calmly without those signals, the atmosphere changes. People become more careful, more attentive, more respectful. not because the person is aggressive, but because they are independent. Independence changes how people perceive authority. True authority does not chase agreement. It allows disagreement without losing composure. It allows misunderstanding without panic, and it allows silence. Silence is something most approval seekers cannot tolerate. If a conversation becomes quiet, they rush to fill the space. They clarify. They add more explanation. They attempt to repair the silence. But the person who no longer seeks approval can simply remain quiet. They allow the moment to exist without forcing a resolution. And strangely, this quietness often shifts the balance of power, because people begin wondering what that silence means. They start interpreting it, thinking about it, trying to understand it. In psychological terms, uncertainty creates attention. When people cannot easily read someone, they watch them more closely. They become more aware of their presence. And this is one of the hidden advantages of not seeking approval. You become harder to read, harder to predict, harder to categorize. This doesn't mean you become mysterious on purpose. It simply means you stop over-explaining yourself, and when explanation disappears, interpretation begins. Now, here's the paradox. The less someone tries to control how others perceive them, the more control they often gain over the interaction. Because people naturally adjust to calm certainty, they sense stability, they sense confidence, and they respond to it. Think about the most respected individuals you've encountered. Not the loudest, not the most argumentative, but the ones whose presence felt steady. They spoke clearly, they didn't rush, they didn't defend themselves endlessly, and they seemed comfortable even when others disagreed. That comfort sends a powerful message. It says, "I do not need your approval to remain calm." And when people hear that message, they instinctively treat the person differently. They become more cautious, more respectful, more attentive, because approval is no longer a tool they can use. Now, this shift does not happen overnight. Most people have spent years building the habit of seeking approval. It becomes automatic. But the moment you begin noticing the pattern, you can slowly change it. Start observing your own conversations. Notice when you explain too much. Notice when you rush to correct a misunderstanding. Notice when you soften a statement just to avoid discomfort. These are the small signals of approval seeking, and once you see them, you can begin reducing them. Speak clearly. State your position once. Allow others to disagree without trying to rescue the conversation. Remain calm when silence appears. These small adjustments create a surprisingly large effect over time. People begin interacting with you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior signals independence. And independence naturally attracts respect. There is an old Stoic idea that captures this perfectly. The Stoics believed that the only true control we have is over our own actions and judgments. Everything else belongs to the outside world. Approval, praise, criticism, reputation, all of it exists outside our control. But when someone bases their identity on things outside their control, anxiety becomes inevitable. They must constantly monitor the reactions of others, constantly adjust, constantly perform. The Stoic solution was simple. Focus on what belongs to you, your decisions, your behavior, your character, and let everything else unfold naturally. When you adopt this mindset, approval becomes less important. Not because you reject people, but because your foundation is no longer built on their reactions. You begin acting according to your values instead of their expectations. And slowly, the pressure disappears. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need everyone to understand you. You no longer need every interaction to end in agreement. And the strange result is that people often respect you more, because the calm person who does not chase approval appears grounded, stable, trustworthy. Their behavior is not constantly shifting to match the room. It remains consistent, and consistency builds credibility. Over time, people begin listening more carefully to someone who doesn't constantly seek approval, because they know the person is speaking honestly, not strategically, not to please, but simply to express what they believe. And that kind of honesty is rare. In a world where most people are carefully managing how they appear, authenticity stands out. Not loud authenticity, not aggressive authenticity, but calm authenticity. The kind that does not demand attention, but naturally attracts it. The moment you stop seeking approval, your life changes in subtle ways. You think more freely, you think more clearly, you make decisions with less hesitation, and relationships become more genuine. Because the people who remain are not responding to a performance. They are responding to the real you. And that is where true confidence begins. Not in dominating others, not in winning arguments, but in the quiet realization that your worth does not depend on their approval. And when that realization becomes real, something shifts permanently. Your behavior becomes simpler, your mind becomes calmer, and your presence becomes stronger. Because the moment you stop seeking approval is the moment you stop giving away your power. If you want to explore these Stoic principles more deeply and apply them in everyday life, take a look at my Stoicism ebook in the description.